ground vehicles are kind of a neglected area in Star Citizen. Not neglected in terms of coming up with new vehicles to sell, but neglected in the sense that they've always been a novelty and not really a core part of many people's ideas of Star Citizen. However, there are some fans out there in the Star Citizen universe, myself among them, who wish that ground vehicles, for a multitude of reasons, had a better purpose in Star Citizen rather than just being, kind of like little fun buggies to mess around with. And when we're talking about things like changes to the flight, combat model and master modes and things like that, I think that much like this, ground vehicles do require a bit of a rework. Now, one of the biggest problems that you'll find with ground vehicles is what you're going to see with this ground vehicle right here, which, like most wheeled or tracked vehicles, really suffers from two big problems, or one unavoidable problem, and then the other problem, which is something that technically CIG has already fixed with another group of vehicles, which you could kind of call ground vehicles. But they haven't implemented the fix on these ground vehicles, and I think it's something that is long overdue, which is a throttle limiter. Now, when you're flying a spaceship, you can actually set an upper limit as to how far your throttle will go. Usually middle mouse button for people who are playing a mouse and keyboard, but depending on your different flight configuration, it may be something completely different. Now, with ground vehicles that are wheeled vehicles or tracked vehicles, you don't have this option. So you are pretty much W makes you go, and it makes you go full tilt. It's just pedal to the metal. It really is kind of a very basic GTA style interface, and it's not very good. If we had a throttle limiter, we could avoid some of the interface issues that we have with the ground and the tires, which is to say that, if you think of your tires as your control surfaces, in order to actually be able to use them, they have to be interfacing with the ground. But if the vehicle is constantly bouncing off of the ground because it's going too fast, then you will experience only intermittent control. And that's when you get into these situations where you go, oh, I got to steer, I got to get out of the way of something, but you can't, or the reaction is very much delayed. And this is one of the things that makes ground vehicles a novelty, and actually sometimes quite annoying. Now, we can't really do anything about, bouncing over the ground. It's not like we're going to build roads and highways everywhere. Some roads may exist in the future, but chances are, if you want to travel overland, you're going to have to deal with, this kind of intermittent interface if you decide to travel very quickly. But the problem of using the W key as kind of like forwards or your throttle can be mitigated a lot by the use of a throttle limiter, just the same way that you have on a spaceship. By being able to set that maximum to a significantly lower speed, you can make the vehicle much, much more manageable. So that is kind of, something that I would recommend for the wheeled and tracked vehicles in Star Citizen, is expand the functionality of the throttle limiter to those vehicles. The best vehicles right now, and oh, by the way, credit where credit is due, being able to adjust the ride height on space bikes. Not sure exactly when this came in, but the fact that I was able to so easily load this space bike onto my ship and then mess around with it, very much appreciated. But space bikes have a throttle limiter. In fact, you'll probably see me adjusting it in a moment. Now, of course, space bikes are very, very fast, and there it goes. If you look at the left-hand side of the HUD, you'll see me adjusting it up and down. But when you're able to lower the speed, you're also able to better manage, terrain, obstacles, and things like that. Hoverbikes right now in Star Citizen, even if you factor out the fact that this hoverbike, the Drake Dragonfly, has a small amount of cargo space that comes with it, are probably the most useful of all ground vehicles currently in Star Citizen. If you really wanted to be careful, if you really wanted to be sneaky in Star Citizen, technically speaking, you could load your weapons. You got a backpack to carry some goods back with you, possibly storage on the bike in the future. It would be very nice if that was implemented. But what you can do is you can use this, park your ship not next to the ground target that you're going to, but quite a ways away, and then use this, one of the stealthiest vehicles in Star Citizen, if not currently the stealthiest, to approach your objective, allowing you to sneak in where a lot of these objectives tend to be camped or tend to be watched, and allow you to get in under the radar, possibly assassinate your target, complete the mission, then get back on your bike and get out of there. Realistically, if you were wanting to do ground missions, specifically like assassination missions or clear out the bunker type missions, a space bike would be an ideal way to avoid the unfortunateness of landing your ship at an objective and then finding out that someone's outside blowing up your ship while you're trying to complete the mission. Being able to park your space bike some ways away and then basically hoof it the rest of the way in might alleviate some of those problems, but once again, it depends on how visible the space bike remains when it's at the surface. Now, beyond these two things, there really is one other big thing that really needs to be done with ground vehicles, and that isn't so much the ground vehicles themselves, but the world in which the ground vehicles inhabit. There's no real reason to use them. Now, I kind of made a bit of a case, and I mean, you can poke a few holes in it. It's fairly easy on why you could use the space bike currently. But beyond that, what if certain objectives on the ground weren't reachable because of air defenses or storms or whatnot? We've heard CIG talking about this, but they have yet to implement it. They're more busy implementing, physics. But realistically, any of these things could be implemented. We could turn certain areas into no-fly zones. We could turn certain areas into a death trap with AA turrets, making it very difficult, if not impossible, to get in there. So the only way to get in would really be to use ground vehicles, and possibly ground vehicles from some ways away. Now, of course, players would have to invest a lot more time and preparation into these missions. But I think that would be worthwhile. I think that would overall be a positive, and it's something that should be explored, and not just for the sake of, oh, well, now you got your ground vehicles, now you can have fun with them. There's a lot of unanswered questions, and there's a lot of potential issues with ground vehicles. For instance, should you be able to plug your suit's life support into the ground vehicle? Should you be able to somehow be able to draw water and food out of your suit through like feeding tubes or whatnot? We talk about this from time to time, but it's kind of a very obvious feature that we really need to talk about implementing, especially when CIG is so aggressive with their need to drink and need to eat. I mean, I get the fact that you want people to realize that feature is there and to interface with it, but beyond the novelty of doing it once or twice, it really just becomes an inconvenience. So perhaps we need to look at feeding tubes in spacesuits, or possibly making it so that vehicles can recharge at least the oxygen in your spacesuit, whether you're on a space bike or on, in one of these vehicles here, so that the space or the vehicle itself kind of mitigates to a certain extent the environment that you're traveling through, so long as you're within the confines of the vehicle and operating it. It can help your suit with its cooling or heating. you could allow players who choose to use different types of armor, or armor that is lighter than what would traditionally be needed to survive in an environment like that, to survive, so long as they continuously get back to their vehicle and allow it to kind of recharge the suit, or mitigate the impact of the environment. There's a lot of little things that you could do, but in the end, you do kind of have to do some big things with how you design missions. And when we're talking about revamping outposts and whatnot, one of the kind of big problems with Star Citizen that they do seem to be getting away from was the portable habitats that were the basic bases that were dropped on the ground everywhere. And I think that was more a reflection of what they intended to be, like the constructed ones that players dropped on the surface of the planet, probably when they didn't really have an idea as to the timetable when they would be implementing it, and so they just kind of wanted to test things out a little bit. With the newer ground locations that seem to be coming with Pyro whenever Pyro shows up, with these new bases, I think that there should be a serious look at AA defenses, or whether it be missiles or guns or whatnot, or just other systems of area denial that require ground vehicles. I mean, obviously, for the amount of logistical work that you're going to have to go to bring a ground vehicle to the fight, the rewards should scale up, obviously. But if we really want to understand what these vehicles' value are, and how to make them worthwhile and enjoyable, not just as a plaything to occasionally pull out of the hangar and bomb around in, but for something that has a very real in-game impact with its own strengths and weaknesses, we really have to test it. We really have to give players a reason to bring these things out. We have to put ground turrets out for the tank to shoot, or we need to have something like the Spartan or Ballista that can traverse a large distance and either protect other vehicles from air attack, or just get troops to the battlefield. When we talk about areas that are occupied with NPCs, we rarely ever have to deal with the fact that there might be NPCs who control the air. Because of missile defenses, we can't get friendly forces in there, but a ballista or any other vehicle that has an AA capability can get in there from the ground and then fire up at those mission targets. That would be interesting. I think that would be a lot of fun. But because of the way that the missions are currently designed, we don't really open the door to that. And I think that really is kind of a big missed opportunity.
Thank you for watching. So if you want to keep up with the latest and greatest in Star Citizen and Squadron 42's development, please follow us on our social media channels. See you soon.